hour here. So, welcome to Verticals Learn Something, everybody. Verticals Learn Something was created in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. We all know that it's really hard to be at home and isolated right now. So we're trying to break up your work week with tiny tutorials where you can learn something fun. This month, we have an expert dog trainer to help you learn to make your dog the perfect office mate. And we have Megan Wallace. She has a bunch of certifications. She has the CPDT-KA. I think that's what it is.
Yes.
The CNWI. And then she's also the owner of Dogs Deciphered. Don't forget, everybody, this session is powered by leads from you. If you know of anybody who needs to learn more about a telecom system, who has problems with their own telecom system, anything like that, let us know. In the chat box, there's a little link. You can sign up for the raffle where you can enter to win a free virtual dog training class with Megan. And you can also help power Verticals Learn Something. So as a reminder to everyone who hasn't attended before, this session will be recorded. We're going to distribute it later. You can go back and learn some more from Megan if you want to. And with that, Megan, I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate you guys having me here. And I think this is a great topic because it's on everyone's mind. I think everyone's experienced being in a Zoom session where, dogs started barking or a cat walks across the screen or, our pets are much more involved in our work lives than they ever have been. So I think this is a great topic to discuss, and I hope that you guys really enjoy it. I am going to try to leave some time at the end for questions. So I am working off of a presentation. So my video will disappear while I'm going through that, but then I will, as I alluded to, bring out my own demo dog and show you one of the exercises in real time, because I think that that's will be really valuable to you guys. So I am going to share my screen here. Get over to this. So today we're going to be talking about how to train your dog to be your perfect office mate. And I am Megan. I am a certified professional dog trainer and a certified nosework instructor. I have been training my dogs most of my life and started doing it professionally about 7 years ago. Most of my clients I see for their dog's behavior issues, so things that they're struggling with in and around their homes. And I also teach canine nosework classes, which is, I'll talk a little bit about when we talk about stimulation. Basically, it's kind of a scent detection sport that's very fun for dogs and people alike. I own 4 dogs myself, a Rhodesian Ridgeback Fox, who you'll see today, and 3 Border Collies. So we have a lot of energy in this household, but they're being wonderful, relaxing right now while I present. And I love volunteering at the Rocky Mountain Raptor program. And so you can see my photo here is with one of our educational ambassadors, a little American Kestrel. So that's kind of my side hobby outside of dogs, and also love listening to live music. So we'll talk a little bit about my training philosophy here. There's really the 3 things that I really want you to know. We really have to focus on teaching the dog what we do want rather than focusing on what we don't want them to do. No one should work for free, right? Your dog shouldn't work for free either. So if you guys heard me talking about my demo dog Fox, he does get paid well for his job because I want him to enjoy doing it and continue to do that with me. And I think that it's really important to always focus on finding your success, even if that means just taking a few steps back in the training process and getting to a point where you can be really successful and then build from there. So what does it take to make a perfect office mate? Pictured here is my now 6-month-old Border Collie puppy, Han Solo, and Fox in the background sleeping on the couch here. So they need to be able to relax even when there's some distractions around, and we'll talk about how to teach that. One thing that's important for most of our dogs now, I've kind of gotten used to the idea of, I put Zoom calls, sorry, but, any sort of this teleconferencing sort of thing where they might hear sounds from the other person's screen, another dog barks. So that's something that you just have to consider, is that something they have to kind of get used to, that not all dogs are used to. We want to make sure they can be redirected after they're startled or they're distracted by something, and that they have adequate stimulation so that it's a reasonable expectation to ask them to calm down during our work hours. So the things that you will need to teach some of these behaviors are a bunch of tiny treats. You can use your dog's kibble if that's something that they will work for and that they like. That's what I'll be using for Fox today. I also will use very small cut up pieces of string cheese. There are some good commercial treats, although even the ones that are labeled for training treats are often too big for most dogs, especially that adorable little pug or your older Chihuahua. Those sorts of dogs, we really want to have a teeny tiny little treat so that we can use multiple of them and the dog isn't getting full. And then I'll use something like a mat, a towel or a blanket works well to teach the dog where I want them to relax, so kind of a spot that they can go to. You might want to use a non-retractable leash if you're needing to kind of control your dog's movement around. If they're a very active dog, you can use a leash as a tether, but you don't want it to be a retractable type because that's hard to manage. And then you want to make sure that you have a lot of patience that as you're teaching your dog these new skills. So the first thing that I'll kind of go over with you guys is how to teach relaxation. The way that I look at it is similar to meditation in humans, but for dogs. So it's more about the journey than a destination. So you're always kind of teaching them to be able to relax more. It's not like a finite point where your dog just kind of understands all that they could about relaxation. We want to, when we're in the training process of this, create a strong expectation for the dog that another reward is coming. And I'll explain that a little bit when I demo this with Fox, but we want them to think that the actual behavior of laying down and relaxing is more valuable than the getting up and being released, because sometimes people kind of switch that and they make it all about the woohoo, you're free. And I want the dog to learn that the relaxation is the more valuable part of this behavior. So we do ideally teach this in a down position, but if for whatever reason your dog hasn't learned a down or has trouble with that, there are certain breeds like bulldogs and greyhounds that can often have a little bit of trouble with that down position. And so we absolutely can use a sit for this behavior as well, if down is not as relaxing to them. So we'll just go over the first steps and so that you can kind of have an idea of what we're going to do when I show you my demo here. I'm just going to count out about 5 to 10 treats, so I'm ready. Then I'm going to cue or lure my dog into that down position. If they haven't learned the behavior, you can kind of use a food lure to lure them down. Then you're going to reward by placing each of those treats in pretty quick succession between the dog's front paws. And then when we're done with all of those treats, we're going to give a release cue like, okay, or I say break to my dogs. And so that says, okay, you're done with the behavior. So that's kind of the order of the first steps that we're going to do to teach this relaxation. And then we want to think about what we often refer to as the 3 Ds. Duration is how long can the dog stay in that position? Are they actually comfortable holding the position? How distracting? How many distractions are around? What sort of environment is the dog in? So you may start relaxation in a place like your living room, which is less distracting, but you may eventually expect that the dog can do that maybe in an outside environment or somewhere that is much more distracting. And then the distance says how far away are we from the dog. And this is something that people tend to focus on when they teach their dog like a stay cue. But really, for relaxation, the first 2 are the most important, and then we can build in distance once the dog is really good at just kind of maintaining that position even when there's a lot going on around them. Okay, so I'm actually going to do a stop share right here and come back to this in a moment because I'm going to show you, whoops. Oh, I see. stop share, but it was still up on my screen. So you guys can see me now, right?
Yep, we can see you.
Perfect. So I'm going to demonstrate this with my own dog and kind of talk you through some tips on how to work this. If you'd like to join in with your dogs, if they're not busy napping, then you're absolutely welcome to. So I'm just going to back up here a little bit. It can be really helpful to have sort of like treat stations around your house. Like I just keep these nice gelato containers and fill them with some kibble and just put them around the house so that you have something that your dog can't get into, but you can kind of surprise them with treats so that they don't always know where they're coming from. So that's a really good little trick. One of my trainer friends calls them success stations. So you're kind of prepared with the food when you might need it. So we're going to back up here a little bit. This is Mr. Fox here. I'm going to lower my camera so it's a little easier to see him. There we go. All right. Here, bud. So we're going to lure the dog into that down position. And then you're just going to start putting some treats down in front of them. Okay. Then when I'm done giving him treats, he says, I don't even want to get out of position because I just want more of those. I could toss a treat away to kind of reset him and then give him a chance to get more. Yes, good boy. So one thing I'll point out is right now he's in what I call a sphinx position, which is his hips are directly under him. So he could just kind of spring right out of this down into a stand. And so one thing I can do to start to get him into a more relaxed position is bring that treat around more by his shoulder. So you could see that caused him to kind of flip over onto one hip. And then I can start just rewarding there so that he understands, that he's kind of anchored there and he's not as primed to get up from this position. And you can see here where I can start to spread out those rewards. I'm not just feeding him every second. It depends on how much practice your dog has with this sort of behavior, how quickly you can progress to longer intervals in between treats. But as long as I haven't given him my release cue, I'm going to occasionally just pay him for hanging out there so that he gets nice and relaxed. You can incorporate the mat into this. I just have a small mat here, a little blanket sort of thing, much too small for him, but it will work to show the behavior. And you can just do the exact same behavior while rewarding your dog for lying down on a specific spot. Good boy. Good. So the next stage after this, hey, but good job. Get back to where you guys can see me. So the next stage after this would be to start to make this look a little bit more lifelike. So instead of being down on the ground with the dog, especially those of you with little dogs, you can, if they're raised up, that's a little bit easier. But you want to start to transition to maybe sitting in a chair and rewarding your dog for relaxing. In your office chair if you have a specific area where you'd like them to lay down. So just starting to kind of make it look less like a training session and more like your everyday routine, but you may still have that little treat jar sitting on your desk ready to occasionally toss them something so that they are happy to hang out there with you while you work. Any questions about that exercise?
I don't have anything, but how long does it, I guess I do. How long does it take for something like that to really start to stick with your dog?
Yeah, so it can depend somewhat on kind of their learning history, what they have learned before. But I actually find that if you really focus on kind of the these little foundational bits that I'm looking at, you know, rewarding really frequently, making sure that they're not moving around during that. Because what happens when we try to spread those rewards out too quickly is that the dog starts trying other behavior to like, well, what if I do this? What if I do that? And so we want them to really understand that maintaining this position is what we want. And I would say that, you know, within a couple of sessions, you should start to see the dogs really understand that it's worth it to just kind of hang out and not try to be getting up and getting the treats and all that sort of thing. That I often will call this dinner in a movie. You just hang out and watch what's happening around you, and the food will come to you. So that's something that I think for most dogs comes pretty quickly, as long as you're not working against something like a real anxiety issue or you know, a very hyperactive dog that's not getting enough stimulation. They may struggle a little bit more to learn this behavior. But I would say that you should start to see an understanding of what you're asking for within a session or two. So it can be quite quick that you can start to spread out those rewards. And then I would say, you know, depending on how often you're working on it, it may take several sessions to get to, you know, kind of that maybe 30-second in between treats mode, which is much more functional. You know, you can kind of at least start to, like I said, make it look a little more lifelike, where you might be actually in your office and that sort of thing. But you would still be doing sort of separate training sessions so that you know, the dog is getting a pretty high rate of reinforcement. But within a couple of months, I think you would be easily able to have a dog that, if you teach that, can really just actually relax without really much reinforcement other than, you know, an occasional acknowledgement of what a good dog they are. So you definitely don't have to become reliant on the treats. It's just part of the teaching process so that they can really understand what we expect of them.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it really can depend on how much time you have to devote to it and what you're starting with. If you already have a pretty relaxed dog, it's not going to be as hard. If you have a really active young breed, it may be, you know, that it takes a little bit more time to get there, but they really absolutely can learn. You know, my young Border Collie is 6 months old now, and he's perfectly capable of laying there for several minutes without any reinforcement in between and just laying there calmly. So yeah, it's definitely something they can all learn. Okay, if we don't have any other questions, I'm just going to kind of go over one other exercise that I think can be really helpful to teaching your dog. Oops, what is happening here? Okay. All right. So, go to a specific step. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is how to teach our dogs to recover from startling events. Dogs bark, as we all know. They will do it if they're afraid of something, if they're startled by something, excited, alarmed, lonely. So we want to really look at what the reason that we have a barking, you know, if our dogs are barking a lot while we're working, we want to kind of look at what the reason is. If they're just, you know, away in a crate and that's not something that they're really used to, they may bark just because they don't want to be in there. But it also could be, you know, if they're loose and the mailman comes, or, you know, a squirrel dares to, you know, make a presence outside the window, then that could be the cause of the barking. So we really want to kind of look at what the motivation behind it is. But most of the time, we really want to focus on how to get the dog to recover from that startling event. Because if we just focus on suppressing the barking, it's always going to come out somewhere else. So we really want to think about, when dogs do bark, how are we going to get them to recover from that? And we want to be as consistent as possible in our response, because that's going to make it really clear to the dog exactly what's expected of them. And it'll help them to start to learn to deal with those more startling or exciting sorts of stimulus and learn to settle down in those sorts of situations. So the game that I love to teach for this, I call the treat toss game. It gives the dog kind of a structured response when you call their name. They're excited to be engaged with you. This is actually the first game that I teach every dog that I work with. It's really fun and easy, and it's very predictable for the dog. It can be expanded in a lot of different ways. So we can teach our dogs all sorts of different skills using this as sort of a foundation. So here's a quick video of me teaching this to one of my dogs. And of course, I've got to pay my lovely, oops, I forgot I had video or sound on this. So yes, I put the treat on the ground, and then as soon as she looks up at me, I mark with the word yes, and then I put another treat down. So I can start to get her to move around a little bit more by tossing the treat to the side, but I'm always looking for that focus up on me. As soon as she looks up at me, I reward. And then I have to pay my lovely waiters over here who are not trying to get involved in the training session, which is great. So this is a really simple game that you can teach to get your dog very engaged with you. You can use, and I'll show you a little demo of this with Fox as well. You can use their name after you've dropped the treat. You can call their name, so you're starting to work on a recall. Here I'm starting to get her to come into me and sit. But there's a lot of different ways that we can expand on this game. And if any of you guys end up working with me, like I said, it's the very first thing that I will teach any dog that I work with because it's a very versatile game. Okay. Let's move on. There we go. So then the last little bit that I want to talk about is making sure that our dogs have enough stimulation. You will find that mental stimulation is going to have a lot more of an impact than physical stimulation. So a lot of times people will actually over-exercise their dog trying to tire them out, when really the answer is getting them enough mental stimulation and letting them use their brains, because that's what's actually going to tire them out. It's not just running after something or, running around the block that's going to get them really tired. And if you do have an adequately stimulated dog, you should, like I said, unless you're dealing with a real anxiety issue or something like that, that they shouldn't have any issues learning to relax and recover from those startling events. Like we were just talking about. So that's why we always want to aim to make sure that they have enough mental stimulation. So some of the ideas that we can use for that, definitely training games are great. I mentioned my canine nosework classes. This is a picture from such a class where we actually teach dogs to search for food in boxes. So they just start off searching for food and the boxes are all spread out. This is a little exercise we call Box Mountain, where everything gets piled together and the dogs get to crash through it and find their treats and have a great time. And certainly if you want to learn more about that sport, get in touch with me because it's a lot of fun. But you can just teach this at home with searching for either food or toys. And then one of my trainer friends coined this term of sniffari walks, which I thought was cute. But basically the idea is taking, instead of just kind of your typical walk around the block that you might do for exercise, you may take your dog to a large field or somewhere like that and use a long line. So something, like a 10 to 15 foot long line, and let your dog just be a dog and sniff to their heart's content and just really get that chance to explore the world and that sort of thing. So that's something that you can do to give your dog some mental enrichment. I apologize for the barking in the background. It's pretty ironic during this particular presentation, but that is my 6-month-old puppy who's had more away time than he probably should have today. So it's a good point in talking about mental stimulation, that he might just not have had as much as he should today. So in terms of troubleshooting, like I said, if you are struggling with your dog's behavior in this regard, don't let behavior problems reduce quality of life for you or your dog. If you are really having a hard time getting work done because of your dog's behavior, that is a time when you're going to want to call in a professional. You don't want to let that just go on and be ruining your quality of life. And you always want to be patient and understanding with yourself and your dog. This is a very strange time that we're living in, and not what most of us would consider ideal for a lot of our work lives, although working at home is kind of nice. But anyway, it's something that we want to make sure that we kind of understand. This is just a tough thing that we're all going through. And yeah, so if you do need additional help, I am available for either in-person or virtual help. I also, so I know you guys have the raffle, which is awesome, but I also am offering a discount to participants of this for 15% off of my foundations package. And that can be either virtual or in person, depending on where you live. I'm in Loveland, Colorado. And so you can go to my website, that's just dogsdeciphered.com, and schedule a phone consultation. If you have any questions about your dog or aren't sure if you need professional help, you can always schedule that phone consult and we can kind of talk about the options there. So, get back to my screen here. Let me do a quick demo of that treat toss game with Fox here. Let me see if my husband came to let the puppy out. So, Fox. I lost my demo dog. All right, well, I'm glad I had the video of that one. But like I said, there's lots of different ways that we can kind of expand on that. It can be a great foundation for, you know, a training, for recall training, for, you know, name recognition, that sort of thing. So lots of different things that you can do with that. I'd like to open it up if you guys have any questions or would like to try a little bit of this with your dogs. I would like to open it up to that now.
Do you do other sorts of training? For example, we have a couple alpha dogs, our son's dog and our dog, but they don't get along real well together.
Okay.
And is that something that you would work on?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, that's kind of managing dog-dog interactions is something a lot of my clients, I think, struggle with, especially in the situation that you say, like, maybe not dogs that live together, but close family members' dogs. That can cause quite a bit of stress because we really want to be able to invite those, you know, our family into our homes with their dog. And so when they aren't getting along with each other, that can be, you know, definitely a challenge. So that's definitely something that I help my clients with. And yeah, I think that's a great reason to pursue professional training is, you know, to manage those interactions between the dogs.
Great. Thank you.
Yes, of course. Any other questions?
What about dogs who aren't food motivated and just don't, like, I have one dog who doesn't care about treats. I could do anything and she'd be like, no, thanks.
Yes, absolutely. So a lot of it is looking at what the dog really does want to work for. So some dogs will be very motivated by, you know, praise and petting. Some dogs could care less about that. I do always want to look at, like, when a dog is not at all treat motivated, I'm assuming that they're eating, you know, at least some meals to stay alive. And so sometimes it can be either that they're getting a little too much at each meal time, and we can use part of those meals for some of the training. It could be, you know, I've met dogs with certain allergy type issues that can become very resistant to trying new things because sometimes treats upset their tummy. And so they start to get kind of averse to novel treats. And so that can be something to look at. So you can be kind of creative in how you use that food and potentially up the food motivation a little bit, because I think that's important. But you can also look for, you know, if a dog is toy motivated, it makes it a little bit tougher to teach something like relaxation to a dog who's not, you know, if they're mostly motivated by toys, because we don't want to get them super excited during that time. But we can certainly, you know, use things like praise and nice soothing tones, you know, not getting them all excited, but just oh, what a good dog, you know, and they're relaxing. So we can use things that the dog is wanting to work for in order to get those behaviors that we want.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's a great question. Any others? Yeah.
So Ziggy has a really, I said your name, didn't I? He knows his name and he's very responsive, and we've done training classes, obviously, since he comes to work every day. But there are some things that really like distract him to the point that I can't get him to hear his name.
Yeah.
And he's a pug, so they're naturally obstinate, and I know that. But we hate bicycles, and we hate other dogs. I don't know why, because he's been around them. He lives with another dog, but he gets, it's like he gets hyper focused on the thing that's annoying him, and I can't get his attention back. Even if I'm wrestling the TREA bag, I can't say that word out loud. He's right here. Even if I'm wrestling a TREA bag or offering FOOD, he will ignore me.
Yeah.
And I know he hears me.
Yeah.
I know he hears me. He's 5 years old. He's in perfect health. He does not have a hearing problem. So how do you kind of get past that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And something that I would say, you know, a lot of people struggle with their dogs is that kind of hyperfixation on different things, whether it's a squirrel or people or dogs, or, you know, it can be different things for different dogs. And it can even have some different motivations. So it may be a dog that really just loves people and other dogs, and they lose their minds because they're trying to go and say hello. Or it could be a dog who feels uncomfortable around other dogs and is kind of trying to push them away. So we can see some of the same behaviors actually occur for different reasons. And often I kind of categorize that as like what I call barrier frustration. Basically, there's something stopping the dog from getting to what they want, whether they're, you know, behind a gate or a fence or a door or, you know, a leash. Something is preventing them from getting to what, getting to what they want. And so it can be a very frustrating experience for them, and that's what causes all of the barking and craziness that they do, because often they are so fixated that they are not in a good spot to control their emotions. And so what you want to do is start to practice reducing that fixation on things. And this is really relevant in terms of dogs who are barking at things out the window, you know, while you're trying to work, that they see stuff and they just can't let it go. So starting in a really small way with smaller distractions, I play a little game with my dogs that's kind of an extension of that treat toss game called Watch the World, where we may go out and anything that they kind of attune to, if they check in with something, I will call their names and toss a treat in the opposite direction, so that they're practicing not only turning toward me, but actually moving away from the thing that they're fixated on. And that's something that I really do a lot in my training, is kind of teaching dogs in situations where they want to get stuck, right, which hyperfixation is definitely kind of they're stuck looking at something that they maybe shouldn't be, or they're getting too worked up about, and helping them to become more fluid. So being able to walk away from the thing, rather than kind of getting that heightened emotion where they're fixated on something, and then you might hear a woof, and then they might start bouncing, right? Like they just kind of go down that spiral where it goes from I'm interested in this thing to I cannot control my emotions about this thing. And we want to have somewhere in between, right, where the dog can actually look at something and then check back in with us. And so I start that in a small way. Actually, that treat toss game is where I start with all of that, so that the dog is kind of practicing that moving away from me, then coming back toward. So my dog came back inside, so I can show you some more of that treat toss game. Come here, bud. So I can toss a treat away. Books. Yeah, what a good boy. One thing that I can add into this is if I want him to come all the way back to me, I can actually ask him to, yes, we're not doing down anymore, to grab his collar before I toss the treat so that he's okay with being caught like that, folks. Yes, good boy. So that he doesn't think that it's a negative thing to come all the way up to me. Good boy, yes, good job. And then you can expand this to, right now in this space, he's going to be pretty focused on me. But if he were to check, hear a sound upstairs and look away, then I can just call his name and he will attend back to me, and then I can do another treat toss. Oh boy. Yeah. So there's all sorts of different things you can add in there, either the collar grab, or even just some extended time. So this is a really great way to teach your dog to kind of wait patiently while you're talking to someone or doing something. And you can see that it creates a dog with a lot of focus on the person, which actually doesn't, sometimes people think that just comes naturally with treat training, that if you've got food in your hand, the dog will pay attention. But as some of you guys have mentioned, that's not always true, right? That there are times where you're trying to get your dog's attention with a treat and they just are not interested at all. And so it is not just, and sometimes when people say, well, of course you have food in your hand, but it takes some time to actually get a dog to be able to respond even to food when they're in that mindset of just being overexcited or upset about something in the environment. Does that make sense? So it's kind of a process of teaching them systematically to kind of be able to turn back to you. I also will do, I wish I had a good video of it to show you guys, but I also will do a little move that I call walking up the leash. So if the dog is just fixated on something and I've tried to call their name and they're just not turning back, and actually, you mentioned that, he has perfectly good hearing so he can hear you. There's actually, when dogs go, especially into a hunting mode, when they're kind of like focused on prey or something like that, parts of their brain actually do turn off. So their hearing can actually be diminished in those situations because it helps them focus on the hunt. So they basically turn all of their stimulus toward factory, their sense of smell and visual, and they don't want to be distracted by outside sounds. And so sometimes when we think like, I know you can hear me, we don't actually know that, because they do kind of turn off their hearing at times when they're really fixated on something. And so that's something that, you can start to teach them to snap out of that a little bit. But I will do what I call walking up the leash, where basically when the dog is just full tension on the leash, won't turn around, I go hand over hand up the leash like this, kind of walking along the leash until I get close to the dog. And then I can either call their name again and see if they'll come to me there. Because it's kind of like, if you had a child at the zoo and they were just fascinated by a certain kind of animal and you call their name and they just don't respond, and you go up and you kind of touch them on the shoulder. And it's like, hey, why don't you, come on, it's time to go, right? It's just that very gentle way of saying like, hey, I'm closer, why don't you come with me? But then you can also, from that point, now that you've shortened up the leash, it's pretty easy to turn and go if you realize you're just too close to something. For instance, if he's barking at another dog, that might be a better situation in the beginning to just turn and create some space so that he can handle it a little better. Yeah. Any other questions?
I see everyone looking around at their dogs, considering if they have any more questions.
Right. Yes. What else do you do?
What else do you do that I find to be upsetting?
Right. Absolutely. And like I said, feel free to reach out if there are questions that you have that you feel like you might need a little more professional help with. There we go. Oh, what a handsome pup. I have reached out to other colleagues with questions with my own dogs that I just felt like I was a little bit too close to, and I wasn't maybe looking at the whole situation, looking at the big picture. And so I think that, it's always good to seek out help when feel like you might need it. So, yeah.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much. This was very helpful. I have 3 dogs. I'm going to apply this to all of them, and I hope that they can all hang out in one room while I work. And
Cool.
thank you, everyone, for attending. Just as a reminder, this session is powered from Leads by You. If you know somebody who needs help with the communication system, who is having a problem, who is looking for something new, who wants to learn more about working remotely so they can stay at home with their dogs, any of those things, please let us know. That link is in the chat box there. I'm also going to send it out in the email following this session. I will also include, Megan, your code for people's trainings in that. So anybody who is interested in working more with Megan, you'll have that resource available. Awesome. And I think that's everything that I have. Everybody, thanks for attending. Megan, I can't say it enough. Thank you so much.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, absolutely. All right, y'all. We'll see you all in the next Learn Something session. Have a great day.
Thanks. Bye-bye.